Wait, you're putting that inside me? The black mail-order bride first trembled, but the cowboy, Amara, sat in the corner of her small room, her hands trembling as she held the crumpled letter. The morning sunlight barely reached her window, and the room felt smaller than ever. She had read the letter a dozen times, yet each word seemed heavier than the last. The agency had promised her a fresh start, a chance to escape the debts that were crushing her family, and even more, a way to leave behind the life that had trapped her for so long. And yet the thought of leaving everything she knew, stepping into the unknown, and going halfway across the world to live with a stranger, made her stomach twist with fear. Her family's situation was desperate. Her father had lost his job months ago, and her younger siblings depended on her mother's small income. Bills piled up faster than they could pay them, and even the little food they had sometimes ran out before the month ended. Amara had always tried to be strong, always tried to find solutions, but this was different. She had never considered marrying someone she did not know. She had never thought of leaving her country, leaving the only home she had ever known, and traveling to a place so far away that she might never return. But when the letter had arrived, it had seemed like a miracle, until she realized it came with a price. The agency had been clear, or at least they had tried to be. "You will have a new life," the letter had said. "You will have security. You will have a home, food, and protection. All we ask is that you follow the terms of the agreement." Amara's hands shook as she reread the words. Terms. The words sounded harmless, almost polite, but the reality felt much darker. The agency had made it very clear that if she refused, if she tried to back out, the consequences would fall on her family. Documents could be released that would ruin them. Pictures could be spread. Secrets could come out. They didn't have to explain everything. They just had to frighten her enough to obey. And it had worked. Fear was a powerful thing, and Amara had felt it wrap around her chest like chains. Her parents had begged her not to go. Her mother had cried, her eyes red and swollen from sleepless nights. Her father had sat silently, a storm of worry hidden behind his hands. Amara had promised them she would return soon, that she would be careful, and that this would solve everything. She had hugged her siblings tight, wishing she could take them with her, but she knew she could not. It was impossible. And so she had packed the few belongings she could carry and left the small apartment she had always called home. The journey to the airport had been long and tense. Amara had stared out of the window of the bus, watching the city blur past, each building a reminder of the life she was leaving behind. She wondered if she would ever see it again. The plane ride had been quiet, her mind spinning with doubts and fears. What if the man she was going to meet was cruel or harsh? What if she could not adapt to his way of life? What if the promises made by the agency were lies, and she was walking into a trap? Each thought made her stomach churn, and she gripped the armrest of her seat so tightly that her knuckles turned white. When the plane finally landed, she felt a small measure of relief, though it was mixed with new anxiety. The airport was nothing like she expected. Quiet, empty, and strangely warm. She looked around for a sign or a person who would be waiting for her, but all she saw were the usual travelers hurrying past, unaware of the life-changing moment happening for one young woman. She followed the instructions given to her in the letter and walked outside to the small parking lot. That was when she saw him. Ethan, the man she was to meet. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with a serious expression that seemed to hide more than it revealed. His eyes were sharp, scanning her from head to toe, but there was no judgment in them, only a quiet curiosity. He stepped forward, offering his hand, but Amara did not reach for it immediately. She hesitated, unsure if she could trust him. She had heard stories, read online about people in situations like hers being taken advantage of, used, or worse. Her heart pounded, and her mind screamed at her to turn and run. But she could not. Her family needed her, and she had promised herself that she would do this. Amara? His voice was deep, calm, and steady. I'm Ethan. I know this is all very sudden, but we can figure it out together. She nodded, her throat tight. Words would not come. She felt as though her voice had been swallowed by fear. Ethan seemed to understand, and he did not press. He helped her with her bags and led her to the truck waiting outside. The ride to the ranch was quiet. Amara looked out the window, taking in the wide-open fields, the rolling hills, and the smell of fresh air. It was beautiful, but it also reminded her that she was far from home, far from safety, and completely at the mercy of someone she barely knew. When they arrived at the ranch, Ethan showed her the small cabin where she would be staying. It was modest but clean, with a small kitchen, a bed, and a desk. Amara ran her hands over the wooden surfaces, trying to absorb the reality that this was now her home, at least for the time being. She felt a pang of homesickness, and her eyes watered despite her attempts to stay strong. Ethan seemed to notice. He did not say much, but there was a kindness in his eyes that made her feel a little less alone. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the fields, Ethan finally spoke. There's something you should know, he said cautiously. The agency has set certain conditions. I don't agree with all of them, but some of them, well, we'll have to figure that out together. Amara felt her stomach tighten again. She had suspected there would be rules, but the way he said it made her heart race. Conditions, she whispered. Her voice was small, almost lost in the vastness of the room. Ethan nodded.
Yes. Some things you may find strange, even frightening.
I don't want to scare you, but it's important you know the truth before we move forward. Amara's mind raced. She did not want to hear the details. Not yet. Fear made her want to run, but at the same time curiosity pulled her forward. She wanted to know what she had agreed to, and so she nodded slowly, bracing herself. As he explained the basic requirements, she felt a chill run down her spine. Nothing physical, nothing unsafe, but still a measure of control over her life, a reminder that she was not completely free. And yet Ethan's tone, his willingness to discuss things openly rather than enforce them, gave her a small glimmer of hope. Perhaps this would not be as terrifying as she feared. Perhaps she could navigate this new life and find her place. By the time night fell, Amara sat on the small bed in the cabin, staring out the window at the stars. The sky was vast, endless, and filled with possibilities. She thought of her family and the reason she had come, and though fear still clung to her, there was also determination. She would not let herself be broken by this. She would face whatever came next, step by step. The first night was quiet. The sounds of the ranch were unfamiliar. The distant lowing of cows, the rustling of trees, and the occasional hoot of an owl. Amara closed her eyes and took a deep breath. Tomorrow would bring challenges, but tonight she allowed herself a small measure of peace. She was no longer just a frightened girl trapped by circumstance. She was Amara, a young woman who had chosen a path, difficult as it might be, to protect her family and create a new life. And somewhere deep inside, despite the fear, there was a spark, a small, flickering hope that she might not just survive this journey, but perhaps even find unexpected strength and friendship along the way. Amara woke up the next morning to the soft sound of wind moving through the trees outside her cabin. The sun was just rising, spilling golden light across the fields. She rubbed her eyes and took a deep breath. trying to shake off the nervousness that had been building since the previous night. She had promised herself she would be brave, but now that the morning had arrived, the reality of her new life pressed down on her chest like a heavy weight. Ethan was already awake. She could hear him moving around in the kitchen, making coffee and quietly preparing breakfast. She watched him from the doorway for a moment. His movements were calm and precise, each action showing the kind of patience and control that made her both anxious and slightly comforted. He was not rushing her, nor was he demanding anything, but there was a seriousness in his eyes, a quiet reminder that she had stepped into a life very different from what she had ever known. Finally, he turned and noticed her watching him. He gave a small nod, a gesture of acknowledgement, and continued preparing breakfast. Amara took a few steps forward, then hesitated. "Ethan," she said softly, her voice trembling, "can we talk about what you mentioned last night?"
He looked at her carefully, as though weighing his words. Then he nodded.
"Yes," he said. "We should talk. It's important that you understand what the agency expects, even if I don't agree with all of it. You deserve to know the truth." Amara's stomach tightened. She had been afraid of this moment since the first night. I don't know if I can do it," she admitted. Her hands trembled slightly as she clasped them together. "I don't understand all of it. It's scary." Ethan walked over and sat down across from her at the small wooden table. "I know," he said quietly. "I know it's frightening. And I won't lie, some of this is unusual. Some of it will feel strange, but nothing will happen to you without your consent. That is my promise." Amara took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. Wanted to believe him. She had to. There was no other way. What is it exactly?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. He looked down for a moment, then met her eyes. "There is a condition in the agreement. The agency has set rules that are supposed to ensure safety and monitoring. One part of it involves a device that tracks certain movements. It's meant to keep you safe in their view. But I don't think it's right, and I won't force you to do anything." Amara felt a cold wave of fear wash over her. She had heard the word device and immediately imagined something invasive, something that would take away her control. Her mind raced. "You're putting that inside me?" she asked, her voice shaking, a mixture of horror and disbelief in her tone. Ethan raised his hands, showing he meant no harm.
No! I'm not putting anything in you.
"That's the agency's plan, not mine. I was trying to explain what they want. You have the right to say no. I will not force anything." Amara's eyes filled with tears. She had expected cruelty or indifference, but here was someone willing to protect her, even if it meant going against the rules of the agency that had brought her here. The fear in her chest was still there, but now it mingled with something new, a glimmer of trust. I don't know what to do," she whispered. "I feel like I have no choice, but I don't want to feel trapped. I don't want to lose everything or hurt my family. I don't." Ethan reached out and placed a hand gently over hers.
You are not alone in this, he said softly.
"We will figure it out. You are stronger than you think, and I will help you. You are not just a victim of this agency. You have a voice. You have a choice." Amara stared at his hand, at the reassurance in his calm voice. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to feel safe. And yet the fear lingered, a constant reminder that her life was now tangled with unknown dangers and expectations. For the rest of the morning, Ethan showed her around the ranch. The land was vast, open fields stretching as far as the eye could see, dotted with animals and barns. The work was simple, but it required effort, patience, and learning new skills. Everything from feeding animals to maintaining fences and tending to small crops. Amara found herself distracted from her fear as she listened to Ethan explain each task. His knowledge was vast, and his willingness to teach made her feel useful, even if she was still deeply uneasy. As they worked, Amara noticed the quiet care Ethan had for the land and the animals. He spoke to them gently, moved carefully so as not to frighten them, and seemed to understand their behavior instinctively. It was a side of him that she had not expected, the gentleness under the firm exterior. For the first time, she thought that perhaps this new life could have moments of peace and safety, even if it started with fear. After lunch, Ethan returned to the topic that had shaken Amara so deeply. He suggested they sit outside by the barn, where the sun was still warm but not blinding. The wind carried the smell of hay and fresh earth, and for a moment the fear in Amara's chest loosened slightly. "I want you to know," Ethan began, choosing his words carefully, "that the agency's rules are not absolute. They think they control us, but we have more power than they realize. You do not have to follow everything they demand. You have a voice, and you can make decisions. You can protect yourself." Amara swallowed hard. The idea of having control, even a little, was foreign to her. She had spent so long feeling trapped, powerless, and frightened that the thought of choice almost overwhelmed her. She wanted to cry, to scream, to release all the tension that had built up inside her. Instead, she nodded quietly, feeling a small measure of courage growing inside her. Ethan continued, "I will be here with you. We will make decisions together. You are not alone in this, and no one will make you do anything against your will as long as I am here."
A sense of relief washed over Amara, but the tension did not disappear completely.
She knew the agency would not be easy to escape, and she knew there would be challenges ahead. But for the first time since arriving at the ranch, she felt that perhaps she could face them. Perhaps she could survive this, not just for herself but for her family, and maybe even find some measure of peace along the way. The day passed slowly, filled with chores, lessons, and conversations. Ethan shared stories of his past, though carefully, revealing the struggles he had faced with the same agency that had brought Amara here. She began to understand that he was not the enemy, that he too had been caught in a system that demanded obedience, but had learned to resist it. Each story gave her hope, each word gave her strength, and each gesture of kindness reminded her that she was not alone. As evening approached, Amara sat outside the cabin watching the sun dip behind the hills. The sky turned shades of orange and pink, and the cool air carried the sound of distant animals settling for the night. She thought of her family, of the debt and fear she had left behind, and of the promise she had made to herself to stay strong. She realized that courage was not the absence of fear, but the decision to move forward despite it. Ethan joined her, handing her a cup of warm tea. They sat in silence for a few minutes, the kind of silence that was comfortable, not empty. Finally, he spoke. "Tomorrow we will start figuring out a plan, one step at a time. We don't have to do everything at once." Amara nodded. Her heart still raced, but it was no longer consumed entirely by fear. She had survived her first full day at the ranch. She had faced the truth about the agency and had heard that there were choices she could make. And she had met someone willing to protect her, guide her, and respect her decisions. As night fell and the stars appeared in the sky above, Amara felt a quiet determination grow inside her. She would not be a passive victim of circumstances. She would face the challenges ahead, learn to trust when trust was deserved, and take control of the life that had been forced upon her. The ranch was quiet now, except for the occasional rustle of animals or the wind moving through the trees. Amara lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking of the long journey ahead. There would be difficulties, there would be fear, and there would be moments when she doubted herself. But for the first time, she felt a spark of hope that perhaps she could survive this, not just for herself, but for the family she loved, and for the possibility of finding a life worth living on her own terms. And with that thought, despite the fear that lingered, she finally closed her eyes and allowed herself to sleep, ready to face whatever challenges the next day would bring. The next morning, Amara woke to a strange mix of excitement and dread. She had slept lightly, her dreams filled with questions about the agency, the mysterious rules, and the promises Ethan had made. She wanted to feel brave, but the truth was, fear still lingered like a shadow at the edge of her mind. The ranch was quiet, and the early sunlight poured gently across the fields. Ethan had already gone out to check on the animals, leaving her a note on the kitchen table reminding her of the tasks she could start with. Amara moved slowly, trying to steady her racing thoughts. She fed the chickens, swept the small barn, and watered the garden. The chores were simple, but they left little room for thinking about the agency or the tracking device that had frightened her so much. Still, she knew it was only a matter of time before the next challenge would appear, and her nerves tensed in anticipation. By mid-morning, Ethan returned with a small bundle of letters. He placed them on the table in front of her, his expression serious.
"These just arrived," he said, his voice low.
Some are other communications related to the agreement. Amara's heart sank. She had been hoping that maybe, just for a moment, the agency had forgotten her or that this part of her life could wait. But now, the letters were proof that she could not escape the rules, and she would have to face them sooner or later. With trembling hands, she picked up the first envelope and opened it. Inside was a formal notice, written in sharp, precise language. It stated that she needed to comply with certain procedures immediately, including a verification step that involved the device she had feared. It was clear, impersonal, and demanding. The words jumped off the page, making her stomach twist with anxiety. The agency had given her a choice, but only on paper. In reality, the notice implied that refusal would have consequences for her family back home. Amara dropped the letter onto the table. Her hands were shaking, and she felt as though the floor beneath her had disappeared. For a moment, she could not breathe. She wanted to scream, to run, to throw the papers into the wind and escape from this new life entirely. But deep down, she knew she could not. She had come this far, and turning back would not only risk her safety, but also the well-being of her family. Ethan noticed the change immediately. "Amara," he said gently, placing a hand on her shoulder, "you don't have to do anything alone. We can face this together. Let's read the letter carefully and think about our options. There is always a way to protect yourself." Amara nodded weakly, grateful for his calm presence, though fear still clutched at her heart. They read the letter together, line by line. Ethan explained the wording carefully, pointing out which parts were rules imposed by the agency and which were suggestions. He was careful to emphasize that she always had a choice in what she allowed. His steady voice helped Amara feel a small measure of control in a situation that had seemed completely overwhelming. After reading the notice, they sat in silence. Amara tried to process everything. The agency wanted compliance. They wanted her to follow rules that felt invasive. And yet, Ethan's presence reminded her that she was not powerless. Slowly, she began to see that courage was not the absence of fear, but the ability to make decisions despite it. Later that day, while walking through the fields, Amara encountered her first major test of resolve. A small vehicle arrived at the ranch carrying two representatives from the agency. They were polite, but their presence radiated authority. They handed over forms and instructions, making it clear that she was expected to follow them without question. Amara's heart raced. She felt trapped between the fear of defying the agency and the knowledge that she had someone by her side who would protect her. Ethan stepped forward. "You don't have to sign anything you're uncomfortable with," he said firmly. "We will go through everything, and we will make a plan that keeps you safe." One of the representatives raised an eyebrow but said nothing. Their eyes flicked to Ethan, as if measuring how much influence he had over her. Amara could feel the tension thickening, a silent battle of wills unfolding around her. Round her, she clenched her fists, realizing that this moment, this confrontation, was a test not just of obedience, but of her own courage and judgment. Ethan guided her to a quiet spot by the barn, away from prying eyes. "You can say no," he reminded her. "You are allowed to question them. You are allowed to protect yourself. You are not alone in this." Amara took a deep breath. The words gave her a flicker of strength. She realized that for too long she had been acting out of fear, letting the circumstances control her actions. Now, for the first time, she had someone encouraging her to take the lead, to stand firm, and to make her own decisions. The representatives left after a few tense hours, clearly frustrated that she had not immediately complied with their demands. Amara felt a mix of relief and exhaustion. The confrontation had been draining, but it had also awakened something inside her, a realization that she was stronger than she had thought. She could face these challenges one step at a time. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills and the sky turned soft shades of orange and purple, Amara and Ethan sat on the porch of the cabin. The air was warm and still, carrying the faint sounds of animals settling down for the night. Amara sipped her tea slowly, reflecting on the events of the day. "I was so scared," she admitted quietly. "I thought I would have no choice at all. I thought they could make me do anything. But now I see that I can make decisions. I can protect myself, even here." Ethan nodded, his expression calm and reassuring. "That's right. You are learning to take control. The agency may try to frighten you, but fear alone cannot hold you. You have courage, and you have the right to use it." Amara felt a new sense of determination growing inside her. She realized that her journey was not just about surviving or protecting her family. It was also about discovering her own strength, her own voice, and her ability to navigate a world that had once seemed impossible. The night deepened, and the stars began to twinkle overhead. Amara lay in bed, thinking about the events of the day and the choices she had made. The fear was still there, but it no longer controlled her. She had faced her first major challenge, and she had come through it with her courage intact. In that quiet moment, she understood something important. Life would not be easy, and there would be more tests ahead, but she had learned that she did not have to face them alone. With someone she could trust by her side, she could confront the agency, the rules, and the fears that once held her captive. And with each challenge, she would grow stronger, more confident, and more determined to claim the life she wanted, one step at a time. As sleep finally took her, Amara felt a sense of hope she had not known in years. She knew the coming days would be difficult, but she also knew that she had the courage, the support, and the determination to face whatever came next. And for the first time since leaving home, she allowed herself to believe that a better life was possible, one where fear no longer ruled her every thought and choice. The next morning, the ranch was alive with movement. Ethan was already outside, checking the fences and making sure the animals were safe. The sun was warm but not too strong, and the soft breeze carried the scent of hay and fresh earth. Amara stepped outside slowly, her heart still beating from the events of the previous day. She had survived the agency's demands, faced her fear, and stood firm in her decision. But today she knew they could return at any moment. She had to be ready. Ethan noticed her coming and smiled faintly, though his expression was serious. "Good morning," he said. "Today we start planning Tua. We can't wait for them to make the next move. We need to be proactive. We need to protect ourselves and take back control." Amara nodded, feeling a strange mix of fear and determination. The idea of taking action was terrifying, but she also knew that if they didn't act, the agency would continue to control them. For the first time, she felt the stirrings of courage, a strength that had been hidden under fear for so long. Ethan guided her to a small corner of the ranch near the barn where they could speak privately. "We need to collect evidence," he explained. "Any letters, messages, or instructions from the agency, anything that shows what they're demanding and how they're trying to control us. With that, we can prove that the rules are unfair and threatening." Amara nodded. She felt her hands trembling, but this time it was not only fear, it was also determination. She moved quickly, gathering the letters, notes, and small documents that had been delivered over the past days. Each piece of paper carried the weight of the agency's control, but now it also carried the possibility of freedom. Once they had collected everything, Ethan suggested they make a plan.
"We will contact someone who can help," he said. "A journalist or a legal aid group."
"Someone who can take our evidence seriously and act to protect you. But we have to be careful. The agency is powerful, and we can't let them know what we're doing until the right time." Amara listened closely, absorbing each word. She had never imagined herself in this situation, gathering evidence, making secret plans, and standing up against an organization that had seemed invincible. Yet, with Ethan's guidance, she realized that she could take small, careful steps toward freedom. The first part of their plan was simple but crucial, organizing the documents and making notes on each one. Amara worked carefully, labeling each letter, highlighting the instructions that were most threatening, and writing down the details she remembered from conversations with the agency representatives. It was tedious work, but with every page she touched, she felt a little more in control. While she worked, Ethan shared stories of people he had known who had faced similar situations. He told her how they had stayed strong, documented everything, and sought help from the right people. Each story inspired Amara, giving her courage and a sense of purpose. She realized that she was not alone in this fight, that others had overcome fear and danger before her, and that she could do the same. By mid-afternoon, they had organized everything and reviewed their plan. Amara felt a mix of exhaustion and resolve. "What if they find out?" she asked, her voice small but steady. Ethan shook his head. "We'll be careful. We move quietly, step by step. Fear is still here, yes, but we won't let it control us. You are stronger than you know, Amara. Remember that." The next step was contacting someone who could help. Ethan had a few trusted contacts he had used before, people who worked with cases of abuse, coercion, and threats. They were cautious but willing to listen if there was proof. Using the small, secure internet connection at the ranch, they sent a carefully worded message, explaining the situation and attaching the organized documents. Waiting for a response was tense. Amara paced the cabin, her mind racing with questions. What if they didn't believe them? What if the agency discovered what they were doing before anyone could intervene? Her heart pounded, but she forced herself to take deep breaths and remember Ethan's words. They were not alone, and they were taking control of the situation. By late afternoon, a reply arrived. A legal aid group had received the message and agreed to review the evidence immediately. They assured Amara and Ethan that they would handle the case with discretion and could take action to protect her from the agency's threats. Relief washed over Amara, mixed with cautious hope. She realized that this was the first step toward real freedom. The days that followed were filled with careful preparation and observation. Amara learned to notice the patterns of the agency's representatives, the timing of deliveries, and even the ways the letters were written. She became more confident in her judgment, more alert, and more capable of making decisions on her own. Each day, she felt herself growing stronger, more resilient, and more determined to take back control of her life. Ethan was always by her side, guiding her, encouraging her, and protecting her when necessary. He taught her not only practical skills, but also how to trust herself and her instincts. Amara began to feel a sense of empowerment she had never experienced before. Fear was still present, but it no longer dominated her thoughts. One evening, after another long day of work and preparation, Amara and Ethan sat outside the cabin, watching the sun set behind the hills. The air was warm, filled with the sounds of the ranch settling into night. Amara felt a quiet satisfaction. They had made progress, and she could see a path forward, even though it was still challenging. Ethan broke the silence. "You have done very well," he said. "You have faced your fear, taken steps to protect yourself, and worked to regain control of your life. That is not easy, and you should be proud." Amara smiled faintly. "I never imagined I could do this," she admitted. "I thought I was too scared. But I feel different now. I feel stronger." "That strength was always inside you," Ethan replied. "I only helped you see it. You have courage, determination, and intelligence, and now we can use that to fight for your freedom." The conversation left Amara feeling inspired and more confident. She realized that this was more than a fight against an organization. It was a fight for her own self-respect, her voice, and her right to make choices. She could no longer be controlled by fear, and she would not allow the agency to dictate her life any longer. Over the next few days, a legal aid group took action, using the evidence Amara and Ethan had provided. They began investigating the agency, documenting violations, and preparing steps to protect her and others who might be affected. Amara received updates that the agency was being watched closely and that any attempt to coerce her further could have serious consequences. This knowledge gave her a sense of relief and renewed determination. She felt a growing sense of independence, a feeling that she could face challenges and make decisions without being paralyzed by fear. Each small victory, each step toward safety, strengthened her resolve and showed her that she could take control of her own life. By the end of the week, Amara and Ethan had transformed the ranch into more than just a place to live. They had turned it into a safe haven, a place where they could plan, act, and prepare for the future. Amara no longer felt like a powerless victim. She felt like a participant in her own story, capable of making choices and standing up against threats. One evening, after a particularly long day of preparation, Amara stood on the porch, looking out at the fields. The sun had just disappeared behind the hills, leaving a sky painted with purples and oranges. She felt the warmth of the moment, a quiet strength that came not from the absence of fear, but from facing it head-on. Ethan joined her, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "This is only the beginning," he said. "There will be more challenges, but we are ready." "You are ready. Fear may still come, but courage and action will guide us." Amara nodded, feeling the truth in his words. She had faced fear, taken careful action, and begun to regain control of her life. She had a plan, allies, and the growing confidence that she could protect herself and make her own choices. For the first time since leaving home, she felt a real sense of hope. The night was quiet, but the silence was filled with promise. Amara knew that the coming days would continue to test her, but she also knew that she was no longer powerless. With courage, careful planning, and the support of someone she could trust, she could face the challenges ahead and create a life defined not by fear, but by her own strength and determination. As she finally went to bed, Amara felt a sense of accomplishment and quiet pride. She had faced the agency's threats, stood firm in her decisions, and taken active steps to protect herself. The journey was far from over, but she had proven to herself that she could fight, survive, and grow stronger. And for the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to dream, not of escape, but of a future built on her own courage and choices. The morning sun rose slowly over the ranch, casting a golden glow on the fields and barns. Amara woke with a feeling she had not experienced in months. A quiet sense of hope. The tension that had gripped her since leaving home was still present, but it was mixed now with a growing confidence and belief in her ability to face the future. Today felt different. Something had shifted inside her, and she sensed that the hard work, courage, and careful planning of the past weeks were finally leading to a real change. Ethan was already outside, tending to the animals as usual. He glanced up when he saw her, his expression calm but alert. "Good morning," he said. "Are you ready for today?" Amara nodded, a small smile on her lips. "I think I am," she replied. For the first time, she felt like she was not just reacting to circumstances, but actively shaping her own life. Together, they had worked tirelessly to organize the evidence, contact allies, and prepare for the agency's next moves. They had survived fear, intimidation, and uncertainty. And now the next step was in motion. Official action against the agency.
Later that morning, a message arrived from the legal aid group.
They had filed formal complaints and notified the proper authorities about the agency's coercion, threats, and attempts to control Amara. They reassured her that her family was safe and that she was protected under law. Amara read the message slowly, her heart pounding with relief and disbelief. She had imagined freedom for so long, but now it was finally within reach. The first visit from the authorities came quietly. 2 representatives arrived at the ranch not with threats, but with careful instructions, assurances, and guidance. They reviewed the documents Amara and Ethan had provided and confirmed that the agency's rules had been illegal and coercive. Amara felt a weight lift from her chest, a weight she had carried silently for months. She realized that her courage and careful planning had made this moment possible. As the day unfolded, more updates arrived. The agency was being investigated, and several of its representatives were being questioned. The documents Amara had collected were being used to protect her and prevent further coercion. She began to see that her life, once controlled by fear and manipulation, was now slowly returning to her control. Amara spent part of the afternoon walking through the fields, breathing in the fresh air and feeling the warm sun on her skin. The ranch, which had once seemed intimidating and foreign, now felt like a place of refuge, a safe space where she had learned, grown, and taken control. The animals moved calmly around her, unaware of the human dramas that had unfolded, but their presence added a sense of peace and continuity. Ethan joined her, carrying a bucket of water. "You've done incredibly well," he said. "Not many people could have faced what you did, organized everything, and stood firm. You should be proud of yourself." Amara smiled, feeling a deep sense of gratitude and accomplishment. "I couldn't have done it without you," she admitted. "Your support, your guidance, it made all the difference." Ethan shook his head. You had the courage the whole time. I just helped you see it. You proved to yourself that you are stronger than any fear or threat." As evening approached, the legal team called with final confirmation. The agency had been officially reprimanded, and their attempts to coerce Amara or harm her family were stopped immediately. The documents, letters, and careful notes she had prepared had made all the difference. Amara felt a mix of relief, pride, and disbelief. She had survived the challenges, faced fear head-on, and now had the freedom she had longed for. That night, the ranch was calm. Amara sat on the porch, looking up at the sky filled with stars. The air was cool and gentle, carrying the scent of the fields and the quiet sounds of nature. For the first time in months, she allowed herself to relax completely. She thought of her family back home, who were safe and unaware of the full depth of her struggle. She thought of Ethan, who had guided her, supported her, and protected her without ever asking for anything in return. And she thought of herself, stronger, braver, and ready to step fully into a life of her own choosing. Over the next few days, life on the ranch settled into a comforting routine. Amara continued learning, helping, and working alongside Ethan. But now, each day carried a sense of choice rather than fear. She was free to make decisions, set boundaries, and move at her own pace. The skills she had gained, from organizing documents to standing up against threats, gave her confidence in herself that she had never known before. One afternoon, Ethan and Amara sat by the barn, watching the animals graze peacefully. She turned to him, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. "I never imagined I could feel this safe," she said softly. "Even after everything, I wasn't sure freedom was possible. But now I feel like I can breathe again." Ethan nodded, his expression thoughtful. "Safety and freedom are not always easy to achieve," he said. "But when you have courage, patience, and the right support, they are possible. And you proved that every step of the way." Amara realized that the experience had changed her, not just in her circumstances, but in her understanding of herself. She had learned that fear could be faced, that courage could grow in the smallest of actions, and that support and trust could make even the hardest challenges bearable. She felt stronger, wiser, and more in control of her life than she had ever been. In the evenings, Amara would walk to the fields, letting the soft wind carry away any lingering tension. She reflected on the journey, the fear, the challenges, the moments of doubt, and the small victories along the way. Each step had been difficult, but each had brought her closer to freedom and self-respect. She realized that survival was not just about escaping danger, but about claiming her own voice and standing firm in her choices. By the end of the first week of complete safety, Amara felt a quiet joy that she had not known in months. She had faced an agency designed to control her, navigated fear and uncertainty, and emerged stronger and wiser. She had proven to herself that courage was not the absence of fear, but the willingness to act despite it. And she had learned that freedom was most meaningful when it was earned through careful thought, resilience, and determination. As the sun set one evening, painting the sky with pinks, oranges, and purples, Amara sat beside Ethan and breathed in the warm air. The ranch was calm, the animals settled, and the field stretched endlessly before them. She felt a deep sense of peace, knowing that she had survived, thrived, and claimed control over her life. She realized that the journey had been as much about discovering herself as it had been about overcoming external threats. "You've changed," Ethan said quietly, noticing the strength and calm in her expression. Amara smiled. "I had to," she replied. "I couldn't let fear rule me anymore, and I've learned I am stronger than I ever thought." The night grew dark, and the stars shone brightly above the ranch. Amara felt a sense of completion, a feeling that her long struggle had reached a turning point. The agency could no longer control her. Her family was safe. She was free. And most importantly, she had discovered a strength and courage within herself that would guide her for the rest of her life. The next morning, Amara woke, feeling light, unburdened, and ready to embrace the possibilities ahead. She knew life would still have challenges, but she no longer feared them.